Hi, my name's Louise Desmier and I'm a senior teacher in Madrid Teaching Centre. My role involves working with partner schools around the city, and I deliver lots of training to teachers in Madrid and also in other cities in Spain. So this talk is about the CLIL classroom and focusing particularly on the speaking skill. So as everybody knows, with the globalisation of English, CLIL is a fast developing area of education, and in the CLIL classroom the subject is more important, but this obviously means that teachers are not necessarily qualified to teach the English language part of the lesson, and speaking is a skill that can be neglected. So we are going to look at some speaking activities that you can use in your CLIL lessons. So the qualities of a good speaker, if we want to make our students better at speaking, we have to understand what qualities we want to promote in them. So first of all, a good speaker needs to have self-confidence. They need to be willing to make mistakes. So they need to be able to put the fluency before the accuracy. They also need to be able to apply strategies to help the listener's understanding. So this means, for example, rephrasing what they say, checking that the person understands as they're following the conversation. A good speaker also needs to select the vocabulary that's appropriate to the context and the situation. Okay, so in terms of the CLIL classroom, this means encouraging students to use vocabulary related to the subject they're learning. A good speaker also involves the listener when they're speaking. Okay, so this means interacting with the listener and adjusting your speaking to make sure that they can understand and follow you. A good speaker also focuses on meaning and not just on grammar. So this means paying more attention to the message that you're trying to communicate and not just on the words and the verbs and the syntax that you use. And finally, a good speaker is motivated to communicate. Okay, so if we don't have a reason to communicate, then why would we make the effort to speak? So a good speaker then basically does anything to get their message across, even if they make mistakes. So this is what we're trying to encourage in our speakers in the CLIL classroom. So some activities to promote these. So first of all, an activity called dictogloss. So dictogloss is a multiple skills activity. And it has three very simple stages. The first stage is that the teacher reads out a text or tells a story. Secondly, the students listen or they take notes, or if they're very young learners, they can draw pictures to help them remember what you're saying. And then finally, the students in pairs reconstruct the story and then report the story back to the class. So the purpose of this activity is to put meaning before accuracy. And the idea is also that you're helping students see that if they don't understand every word in a conversation, it's okay, that they are actually able to reconstruct the conversation and understand what the person is saying. So in your CLIL classroom, this could involve you as the teacher reading a text on the subjects that you're teaching, or they watch a video on that subject, and then you make sure that you incorporate new vocabulary, the words that you want the students to actually use, and then make sure that you monitor the students as they're reconstructing the story together, so that at the end you can give them error correction. So it's really important that you correct students' errors at the end of the activity and not while they're speaking, because this can be very demotivating for them. So that way you're putting the meaning first, but you're also giving a focus to accuracy at the end. Another activity which is really useful to help learners develop fluency, but also to practice their knowledge on a given subject, is a game called Just a Minute. So this is a game that originated on BBC Radio and still exists today, where celebrities have to speak for a minute on a given subject. So this could be any subject that they're given without preparation. So for example, they might have to speak on the Bermuda Triangle, they might have to speak on their favourite TV programme, they might have to speak about what they keep in their pocket, for example. And they must speak for 1 minute without hesitating, repeating, or deviating off the subject. If the person can't speak for the whole minute, a person from the opposite team takes over for the remaining time. And so the idea behind this is similar to dictogloss in that you're promoting students' fluency over the accuracy. So as they're speaking for 1 minute, they're not focusing on the grammar or the verbs or the tenses. They're trying to just keep the conversation and keep the speaking going. And that way they build up confidence. So obviously, depending on what subjects you teach, you will choose topics that are related to that subject, and then that way the students are practicing their fluency and also revising language from the topics that they've learnt. Okay, it's also a really fun game and involves basically zero preparation from the teacher, but you can play for half a lesson or even a whole lesson if the students are really motivated by it. And going back to those qualities of a good speaker, that activity, just a minute, is really good for making students aware that it's okay to make mistakes while they're speaking, and that self-confidence is more important than speaking accurately. The third activity that I'm going to present to you is very simple ranking activity. So this is an activity used a lot in course books but underexploited in the classroom. So in ranking activities, you might give students 5 things to put in order. So for example, weather phenomenons. So you might give them tornadoes, flooding, volcanoes, earthquakes and tsunamis. And in groups they need to talk about what they think is the worst type of weather phenomenon, give their reasons, and then with their team come to an agreement on which phenomenon they think is the worst. The reason that these activities are really good for the CLIL classroom to develop speaking is because it challenges the students to use language persuasively and practice genuine communication. So they're not just speaking because they're told to speak, but they actually have a reason to get their opinions across. So the 3 goals for these ranking activities are: first, to build fluency; second, to practice specific vocabulary, so in this case vocabulary related to weather; and third, to practice language functions. So students are giving their opinions, they're giving reasons, they're persuading the listener, and they're also learning to agree and disagree with each other, but in a respectful way. And the teacher's role as they're doing this in their groups is first to check that all students are participating, because as you know, in groups sometimes the more dominant person can take over and the other students just sit back and they don't say anything. So make sure that they're all participating, make sure that they're giving reasons, and make sure that they're using useful language to get their opinions across. You can also, if you don't want to interrupt them, you can also just observe them and then do some feedback with the students on their weaknesses and then get them to repeat the activity. Okay, so in a minute we're going to see how repetition is really important to develop fluency. Okay, and then if you're feeling really confident, you can join the group of students and actually be one of them and model the language that you want them to use. Okay, and then they will start to copy you and start incorporating new language into what they're saying. Okay, so the last sort of theme of activities that we're going to look at is using the news and bringing the news into the classroom. Okay, so it's really important that a speaking activity is meaningful to the learners, and not just meaningful inside the classroom, but meaningful outside. So information in course books is not necessarily always going to motivate them. So if we can use topics that are current from the news, topics that they've seen on TV or they've heard their parents talking about, then that will motivate them a lot more. So one of the activities that is really quick to prepare and has maximum output from the students is describe and draw. So find a really interesting picture on a news website, put the students into pairs. One of the students shuts their eyes or doesn't look, and the other one looks at the picture for 10 seconds. Then after the 10 seconds, they must describe the picture to their partner. So this can be any unusual photo that you find on a news website that could generate interest and generate discussion between the students. And then after they've listened to each other's descriptions, show them the real picture and get them to hypothesize about what they think the picture is, where it happened, and what the news headline is. So this you can relate to a topic that you've recently covered, whether it's to do with animals or parts of the body or something medical or something financial. You can find all sorts of pictures on news websites, and it's really easy to print those and use them in the classroom. Okay, so and then thinking back to what makes a good speaker, so it's someone that is genuinely motivated to communicate. All right, so if they're motivated by the material that they have in front of them, then they'll be motivated to communicate that to each other. And then using the news headlines can also be a really useful way to bring the real world into the classroom and get students speaking more in English. So this activity is just called headlines. So find several headlines on a news website that you think students might be interested in. So some of the ones that I found recently on BBC News are vitamin D boosts child muscles, or what I saw when I went undercover. Okay, so these are headlines which are kind of intriguing, and we're not sure what the writer's talking about, but it will encourage discussion amongst the students. So one of the students holds up their headline, and that's half the class, hold up their headline, and the other half have to go to the headline that interests them. And then the person with the headline has to describe to them what they think the story is about. Okay, so then if I'm the speaker, I am focusing on my fluency because I need to get the message across to the person listening. And then after a couple of minutes, they rotate, and then you repeat your story to the next listener. And the idea behind this is that students are repeating the same story again and again and again. And research has actually shown that the more students repeat things, the second and the third and the fourth time, they actually make fewer mistakes. They start correcting themselves the second and the third time. They're able to speak more quickly. They're able to speak with more confidence, and therefore they're able to speak with more fluency as well. So they can actually see themselves improving over the course of the lesson the more they tell their story. Okay, so this, going back again to the quality of a good speaker, is somebody who's got good self-confidence. So we need to give opportunities to our students to actually feel confident, because a lot of the time speaking is always the scariest skill because they're put on the spot. So the more practice they're given to repeat their story, then the more confident they'll become. And of course, always try to encourage them to incorporate vocabulary that they've been learning in their subject classes, so that you're bringing together the subject and the speaking. Thank you very much for listening.